Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Business Inspections Housing and Zoning Committee for today, which is August 22nd. I've been joined by council members Chugtai, Osman, Rainville, and Chavez, which is a quorum of the committee. I'll note that we have 3 public hearings as well as 3 quasi-judicial public hearings, and I anticipate that those will take quite a long time. I'm going to start with the consent agenda. As always, item number 1 are the liquor license renewals. I'll note that there are 56 of those. Item number 8 are the gambling license approvals, and 9 are business license operating condition at Students Co-op. Item number 10 is an update on the legislative directive related to snow and ice removal as a element in the rental license tiering process, and I'd want to note, if you read the report, that is going to be part of and has been part of the process. Item 11 is the application for an acceptance of a GO bond-funded grant from the state for the Kohl's Center. Item number 12 is a grant agreement with Minneapolis Public Housing for rehab and redevelopment of a variety of properties. Item number 13 is exclusive development rights to the 927 building at 1828 DuPont Avenue North. Item 14 are financial assistance from Hennepin County for a number of projects that the city is also deeply involved in. Item 15 is a recommendation and joint powers agreement for fiscal year 2023 emergency solutions grant funding. Item 16 is another joint powers agreement with Hennepin County as it pertains to coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security funding. Item number 17 is the spring brownfields grants. This is accepting grants from a number of places, including the Met Council's tax base revitalization account and Hennepin County's environmental response fund. Item number 18 is the cultural small business support program. And item number 19 is a local historic designation of the Wayne and Gertrude Kelly House. And item 20 is a number of properties being rezoned on Van Buren and Summer Street Northeast. Are there any items anyone would like to pull to discuss between items 7 and 20? Seeing none, I'll move approval of those items. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. We'll move on to the regular public hearing agenda. Thank you to everyone who came for any of those items. We'll move on to item number 1, which is our annual CAPER report. We'll have a presentation from Mr. Bauer. Welcome, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and members of the committee. I'm Matt Bauer, Manager of Resource Coordination in the Finance and Property Services Office, and I am here before you today for a public hearing on the city's 2022 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. This report covers our spending on our HUD entitlement grants and housing community development. And with that, I stand for any questions or open the hearing.
Are there any questions for Mr. Bauer on his report? It is available online and to members of the council on LIMS as well. Any questions for Mr. Bauer? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We'll open the public hearing on item number 1, which is the 2022 CAPER report. This is receiving comments. We'll also note that we can receive written comments up until the deadline to be included, which is August 29th. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move approval of item number 1, please.
Item number 1 has been moved for approval. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on to item number 2, which is a land sale at 1860 28th Street East and 2717 Longfellow Avenue to the East Phillips Neighborhood Institute. And I will call on Mr. Hanson to give his report.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. My name is Eric Hansen. I'm the interim director of CPED, and before you are the terms for the sale of city-owned property at 1860 28th Street East and 2717 Longfellow Avenue, commonly known as the Roof Depot site, to the East Phillips Neighborhood Institute or an affiliated entity referred to as EPNI going forward in this presentation, for the fair market value of $11.4 million. These terms were agreed to in May by city negotiators, EPNI, and members of the Minneapolis Legislative Delegation. The city purchased the site in 2016 for the development of a public works facility. The proposed action today and associated public hearing will replace the city council action to pursue that public works facility with a declaration that the site is now excess public land and authorize it for sale to EPNI. As you know, EPNI and other community groups opposed the development of the Public Works facility and advocated for the acquisition of the site for an urban farm. Among other actions, EPNI brought a legal action challenging the project. The proposed terms for the EPNI to purchase the site will allow them to pursue its project. At the core of this deal is the 3 tiers of funding for the purchase of the site. The first is a 2023 $2 million Minnesota legislative grant. The second comes from EPNI in the amount of $3.7 million. And the third and final part comes from a legislative pledge for the 2024 session in the amount of $5.7 million. And let me go through those 3. $2 million from the recently concluded legislative session comes through the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and city staff is working to get that $2 million into the city's hands. The $3.7 million, the second point, is a component that EPNI has until September 8th to report to the city on its fundraising efforts. September 8th is the deadline in the term sheet. However, staff has agreed to accept EPNI's purchase agreement language, providing EPNI with the option of a one-time 60-day extension contingency to this deadline to commit its funding into an escrow deposit with the title insurance company, letter of credit, or personal guarantee as agreed to in the term sheet. And the final component is $5.7 million from the 2024 legislative delegation. Members of the Minneapolis legislative delegation have pledged to appropriate this remaining amount upon the other 2 sources being in place. To allow for this proposed sale to proceed, the city's engineer and the finance officer have determined that the property is not needed for municipal operation purposes, and the city is selling it as is, as excessive municipal operations property. Completing the sale of the property will not occur until all the funds are in place and available for payment to the city, including the contemplated funding in the proposed 24 legislative session. The sale of the property does not commit the city to any future funding obligations. However, EPNI is eligible to apply to all available publicly competitive funding programs. Funding awards in those competitive programs are subject to available funding, program guidelines, proposal quality, and demonstrated need. As part of this report, staff also seeks authorization to enter into the attached access agreement with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to facilitate environmental assessment work by MPCA's contractor under an EPA grant awarded to EPNI. This concludes my presentation, and I am open for questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hansen on land sale number 2? Seeing none, I'd like to have the clerk first record Councilmember Ellison as present and voting in the affirmative on the consent agenda as well as item number 1. Are there other questions for Mr. Hansen? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing on item number 2, which is a land sale as noted, and ask if there's anyone here to speak. I have a sign-up sheet. Each speaker is entitled to 2 minutes. Thank you. Wait just one sec.
Yeah,
so I don't want you
understand.
to be cut off of your time.
No, thank you.
Mr. Davalos, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Dean Davolos, President of East Phillips Neighborhood Institute. Thank you very much, Council, for consideration. We've been working very hard as a committee in putting this project together. We've raised a considerable amount of money. A few examples, residents, and obviously you've got us up to $50,000. And so we're doing very well on the fundraising aspect. We have several investors that have stood up for the $3.7 million. We've proceeded in architectural drawings, you can see here, with anticipation that upon the closing date in June of '24, we'll be ready to start construction. So our intent is when this process is complete with City Council, we'll immediately go for entitlements and get the building ready to receive tenants with the hope that 9 months or a year later, this project will become a reality. And I just want to thank council members and the state legislative body for making this dream come true, because this will be good for Minneapolis, but for the community also. Also in attendance, I have our legal team who, Faegre and Drinker and Frederickson, both have agreed as pro bono basis to handle all structuring of this project in terms of community ownership, the tenant ownership, the investors, and all the processes within it. So they've given us a gift of hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal work to make this reality, make sure we get it right. So I just want to give credit to both these firms for standing up and allowing this to happen publicly. So outside of that, I will conclude. So I'll leave a little bit extra time so you two can introduce yourself, and thank you again for your support of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Davalos. We have 3 others signed up to speak. You're welcome to come up now, just if you could state your name and address for the record, and you don't have to speak at the same time. You each get 2 minutes.
Council for EPNI. I thank the council.
Oh, that was from the last one. Don't worry, we're resetting. Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry?
ma'am. Go ahead, ma'am. That was from the last speaker. I didn't want you to be cut off. You get to start from the beginning.
Oh, okay, I'll repeat that. My name is Elizabeth Royal. I'm the General Counsel for EPNI. And I thank the council for hearing this matter today. It is of a matter of utmost importance to this community that has suffered from pollution for generations. And this is an arsenic superfund site that EPNI hopes to clean up with the help of the EPNA that has agreed to assist us and is also going to be donating, so to speak, to EPNI thousands of dollars worth of work in the aid of cleaning up this site and relieving a community from the health consequences of this toxic pollution under which they have suffered for generations. We have children that are patients of the Native American Community Clinic that are dying because of asthma, which is a health-related consequence from these toxic pollutions under which this neighborhood has suffered. And so I thank the council for working with us to clean this neighborhood up and to make it, to revitalize it and to give it economic opportunity and to give it a chance to live in a healthy way. So thank you very much, and I'm going to yield to my colleague from Frederickson, Shanna, who's going to address some of the things in the term sheet.
Shanna, welcome. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Shayna Conklin. I'm with Frederickson and Byron. The address is 60 South 6th Street, Suite 1500 in Minneapolis. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. I did just want to clarify some of the term sheet overarching terms. One being, and perhaps city staff can clarify this, but we just simply wanted to ensure that the deadlines were updated appropriately. The term sheet used to say that the $2 million appropriation from the state of Minnesota was due on July 1st of 2023. Given that the purchase agreement has not yet been signed, the state has not deposited that funding yet, and we're just hoping that that deadline can be appropriately adjusted. On the 3.7 million deposit, we just had 2 comments, and I think that city staff perhaps already addressed one. One was just with respect to the deadline. We are hoping for an extension to November 8th of 2023 to deposit or provide proof of funding for that $3.7 million, just given the timing of the city's anticipated approval of the purchase agreement on September 7th. With the term sheet originally saying that the deadline would be September 8th, we're just not certain that really makes logistical sense at this point, and we're hoping to update that date to November 8th or 60 days after the purchase agreement is signed. The other point I just wanted to leave open or ask for some flexibility on is that $3.7 million deposit. We're hoping that we can be flexible in the terms of the purchase agreement and simply ask that EPNI be allowed to provide sufficient proof acceptable to the city for that deposit rather than actually depositing those funds. Thank you for your time. I
testimony.
appreciate it.
And the last speaker is Daniel Colton Schmidt. Welcome, sir.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Colton Schmidt. Thank you so much for hearing me. I just wanted to give a quick update on the fundraising efforts since May, the close of the 2023 legislative session. We have raised successfully in the last 3 months over $600,000. $375,000 of that has been awarded in-kind contributions from the MPCA as well as from Frederickson and Byron. We've received $137,000 in grants, and you can see our list of funders there from the Line 3 Legal Defense Fund, Minneapolis Foundation, Headwaters Foundation, Tides Foundation, and LISC. And then there's been some generous philanthropy, community funding, which you might have seen on social media, and faith organizations stepping up. Here you see a bar chart. The furthest left is our goal for pre-development, and this is in advance of the site purchase in the summer of 2024. Our goal is just over $1 million. Budgeted for the pre-development is $900,000, and that includes environmental assessments as well as engineering and architectural assessments as well as capacity building. And you can see there that we are about 70% towards our pre-development goal. So I just wanted to give that update.
Thank you for your update. Is there anyone else here who'd like to testify on this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Members of the council, what we have in front of us is the negotiated term sheet, as well as authorizing the purchase agreement with the East Phillips Neighborhood Institute. Is there someone who'd like to make a motion to approve that?
I'd move for
Go
approval.
ahead. Councilmember Chavez has moved to approve the staff negotiated recommendation. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll now move on to our third public hearing, which is the Stonebridge World School Bond Issuance Host Approval. Ms. Shaw, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and members of the committee. You have before you a request to pass an authorization of host approval for the issuance of tax-exempt revenue bonds by the City of Mendota to Stonebridge Building Company to finance improvements to Stonebridge World School located at 4530 Lindell Avenue South. Stonebridge World School is a Minnesota charter school founded in 2007, serving kindergarten through 6th grade students with a mission of closing the achievement gap. In 2014, the City of Minneapolis issued revenue bonds to finance the charter school. At this time, they are requesting an additional $3.2 million in tax-exempt revenue bonds for improvements to the school building and to refinance other outstanding debt. Federal regulations and state statutes require host approval from the jurisdiction where the school is located, so they are requesting authorization to allow the City of Mendota to issue the new bonds. And the school has paid the City of Minneapolis a $5,000 fee for the host issuance as is provided under the conduit policy. And I will stand to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Shaw? I just have a question about why Mendota is doing this. Is there work in that area as well?
No, there's not work in the area. The reason that first the school came to the City of Minneapolis and asked us to issue bank qualified revenue bonds, but the City of Minneapolis has in our conduit policy, we issue an RFP for bond councils every 2 years. Right now, their bond council, which is Taft Law, is not in the city's bond council registry. So in order to do the financing for the school in this round, they would have to hire 2 bond councils, the one who is familiar with their school, and then an additional one that's on the city's panel. So that's the reason why we're allowing them to go to another city in order to do the host approval.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a good explanation. Are there any other questions for Ms. Shaw? Seeing none, thank you for your report. We'll open the public hearing on item number 3, which is host approval of tax-exempt revenue bonds by the City of Mendota for the Stonebridge Building Company to finance improvements to its building at 4530 Lindale Avenue South. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Happy to move this item for approval.
Item number 3 has been moved. Further comments or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? This item is approved. We will then move on to our quasi judicial public hearings, starting with item number 4. This is a variance appeal by John Thompson and Brittany Vickers for a property at 2110 4th Street Northeast. Mr. Fullhouse, welcome. And before you even start, sir, I apologize for missing agenda setting. Haven't we seen this before?
Chair Goodman, I don't believe the committee has seen this particular request at this proposal. There may have been other applications for this site in the past. This item went to the Board of Adjustment about a month ago, as I'll talk about in more detail, but I'm not familiar with this item coming before the council.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Goodman and members of the committee. Before you today is an appeal of decisions of the Zoning Board of Adjustment regarding variance requests to increase the maximum floor area ratio, or FAR, and to increase the maximum width of an attached front-facing garage. These are proposed variances that are being requested for construction of a new single-family dwelling at 2110 4th Street Northeast. This property is in the UN2 Urban Neighborhood Zoning District and the Interior 2 Built Form Overlay District. These variance requests were denied by the Zoning Board of Adjustment at that hearing on July 27th. I will just note for the record that hearing also included approval of a setback variance for the structure that is not the subject of today's appeal. It's just the denials for the FAR and the garage variances that are before you today. The appellants in this case are John Thomason and Brittany Vickers. They were the applicants for the variances. They're the owners of the subject property, and they would be constructing and residing on the property. This is a survey showing the existing conditions. It's currently a vacant lot that is largely paved over. It has a lot area of 4,363 square feet and is 37 feet wide. It has access and frontage to 4th Avenue to the east, and there is an existing curb cut on that side. There is no alley access to the subject property. Here you can see some different views of what is proposed. It is a two-story single-family dwelling. This dwelling as designed would have a gross floor area of 2,889 square feet, and you can see in the top right is the front elevation drawing. You can see there is an attached front-facing garage on that main level front elevation. Here's some floor plans just to show some other relevant portions of the structure. Again, you can see that attached front-facing garage on the main level. I'll also call out on the upper level floor plan on the right-hand side towards the top that kind of box with the X through it that is labeled as a void area. It's essentially a lofted area, so the second floor surface would not continue all the way across the inside of the structure, but would be lofted so they could look down into the living room on the main level from part of the upper level. Attached garages and lofted areas count towards gross floor area and floor area ratio for zoning code purposes. So again, the relevant variance requests in this case were to increase the maximum floor area ratio from 0.5 to 0.663 and to increase the maximum width of an attached front-facing garage from 60% to 74.1%. The Board of Adjustment denied these two variance requests. In doing so, they adopted staff analysis and recommendations. As the members of the committee are aware, there are 3 required legal findings that come into play for variance requests. So I'll go through the staff findings for those, which are the basis of the board's decision. For the first variance for FAR and that first finding, I'll just highlight the tweak in the language for that finding. It's now challenges due to circumstances as opposed to practical difficulties as it was previously worded. It doesn't really change staff analysis. So the first finding for the FAR variance, the subject property is slightly smaller than a lot of low-density residential properties in Minneapolis. Most properties are around 5,000 square feet or 40 feet in width is kind of a typical Minneapolis residential property. This one is a little bit smaller than that, but not so small as to create challenges in complying with this requirement as staff sees it. Regardless of the size of a property, the zoning code guarantees a gross floor area of up to 2,500 square feet. Attached garages and loft areas count towards gross floor area and FAR, including these in the proposal. These are design decisions made by the applicant, not based on characteristics unique to the property as staff sees it. Property is pretty flat, no substantial slopes or anything that really impacts floor area calculations, so we don't see that this finding is met. Second finding about reasonable use in the spirit and intent of the code. Spirit and intent of maximum floor area ratio is to govern the bulk of buildings to align with the planned development scale of the zoning district that a property is located in. As I mentioned before, the ordinance guarantees a gross floor area up to 2,500 square feet regardless of the size of the property. That is the intent of the code, is to allow a structure up to that size and not bigger for a smaller property like this. Areas like attached garages and loft areas count towards gross floor area in FAR because they contribute to the bulk of the building, and that's what floor area ratio is intended to capture, is the bulk of a building regardless of how it's used. So we find that that is not met. For the garage variance, that first finding about challenges due to unique circumstances, again, the property is a little bit smaller than a typical lot, but it's not so small as to create challenges. The dwelling that's being proposed here, it's 27 feet wide. It's the widest possible structure someone could build while still complying with standard side setbacks. The maximum width of an attached front-facing garage is 60%, so on a 27-foot wide house, you can get a garage up to 16.2 feet in width if it's attached and facing the front. We don't have similar limitations on attached garages facing other directions or detached garages. The zoning code requires a minimum width of 8.5 feet for a standard parking space. We allow parking in a driveway. So the minimum building width is only 18 feet. So any desire to provide any additional parking or storage space in an attached front-facing garage, again, from staff's view, those are design decisions made by the applicant. We don't see anything unique about the property that creates challenges in complying with the code. For the second finding regarding reasonable use and spirit and intent of the code, the intent of the code in this case is very plainly to limit the size of attached front-facing garages. Parking is considered accessory to the principal use on the property typically, in this case the principal use being the house itself. Garages are intended to be subordinate in size and location, and this is also intended to align with the traditional built form of low-density residential properties in Minneapolis, which typically has the house in the front and the parking in the back, including for properties without alley access. This also relates to the principles of public safety through environmental design with regards to the design of the front facade, allowing views to and from the front of a property. As many of you on the committee recall from a few years ago when the city amended the zoning code in 2021 to eliminate minimum off-street parking requirements, this is part of a broader push to limit off-street vehicle parking in Minneapolis and promote transportation alternatives to private vehicles. So with all that said, again, staff finds that that finding is not met. So in conclusion, again, the appeal is regarding these two variance denials. I will note that if the committee is inclined to grant the appeals and effectively approve either of these variance requests, staff would recommend two conditions of approval, kind of boilerplate that we include for a lot of variance approvals, that they have approval of final plans by CPED staff, for example, as part of their building permit, and that construction be completed within 2 years unless extended by the zoning administrator. There were a number of public comments received, mostly in advance of the Board of Adjustment hearing, as well as I think one extra comment that came in after the Board of Adjustment, but before today. Those should all have been made available for your consideration prior to today's hearing. The appellants are in attendance during today's hearing. That concludes my presentation, but I'll stand for questions.
Are there any questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, thank you so much for your report. We will start with the appellant. I understand they are here and welcome to speak. You actually get 10 minutes if you're an appellant in a quasi-judicial. That said, the staff has recommended against it, the Board of Adjustment has recommended against it, and I'm hard-pressed to find out what the practical difficulty or hardship is here. So I would urge you to make your case that there is a practical difficulty or hardship here other than the design that you would prefer. All other comments would be considered extraneous. We won't start the clock till you're plugged in, don't worry.
Appreciate that.
So, Mr. Thompson, I just want to make sure you heard what I had to say.
I'm sorry, I was
You
looking
need-
for a USB port. So.
You have a very tough hill to climb here. You need to explain to us what is the practical difficulty or hardship that would allow us to grant you a variance, given that we have not granted variances outside of the code because when there are not practical difficulties. So I would urge you to stick to that.
All right. I'm John Thomason. Hello. Thank you to everyone on the committee for being here. Here with my fiancee Brittany regarding our home plans and the two variances that were denied by the Board of Adjustments. We spent much of 2021 looking for homes and found ourselves outpriced again and again. On a whim, we decided to take a look at available lots within the city to potentially build a home, kind of just creative thinking to see if we could stay in the city. In our search, we found an unused paved lot in northeast Minneapolis with a residential zoning. We're not developers. Our intention is not to build a home and turn a profit. We are trying to build a home for us to live in for the foreseeable future. We believe that we've designed a home to maximize the full potential of the lot that creates value in the neighborhood. The lot in question is an eyesore. It has been unused and unkept. It's an unused and unkept asphalt lot, has been that way for over a decade, and prior to that, it was a parking lot. In the past, it's been overgrown, filled with trash, left unshoveled in the winter, and occasionally used as a place to sleep or hang out overnight. We believe that in its current state, it's taking away value from the neighborhood. We do disagree with staff findings that challenges do not exist in complying with the ordinance due to circumstances unique to the property with regards to variants 1 and 2, and believe the narrowness of the lot at 37 feet wide, having no rear access nor side access, and the deck of the neighbor to the south overhanging the lot line do create challenges unique to this property. In an attempt to design a home to meet the city's requirements, we discovered that the ordinance were not written in consideration to building a home on a lot that is less than 40 feet wide and additionally has no rear nor side access. Per ordinance 546.420, lot dimension requirements within R2B districts is 40 feet wide with a minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet. Our lot is 37 square feet, 40 feet wide, 4,360 square feet in surface area. In Article 8, lot dimensions, ordinance 552.700, under purpose of lot dimensions, it states minimum lot dimension regulations are established to ensure that sufficient area is provided to meet the functional needs of different land uses and to reinforce existing or planned development patterns in each built-form district. So immediately we are below the minimum threshold for sufficient area to provide, to meet the functional needs. A few other items I'd like to point out: having a separate structure would increase impervious square footage and reduce the amount of green space for our backyard, so moving a garage to the rear, while it reduces gross floor area, because separate structures for parking do not count towards GFA, it does increase impervious square footage. And we're already on a pretty small lot that reduces the size of the backyard, reduces green space, and makes the home, we would have to make it quite a bit smaller. Additionally, a driveway leading up to a garage in the back creates additional impervious square footage. Spaces with ceiling heights above 14 feet are counted twice in the GFA calculation. Detached garages do not count. Prior to October 1st, 2014, applicants were allowed a deduction of 250 square feet for an attached garage in determining GFA for the purpose of the FAR calculation. Half stories do not count towards the GFA for the purpose of the FAR calculation, despite adding bulk to a structure. So if we made a 2.5 story building, it would be the same FAR, same GFA. So there's plenty of homes around the area that are 2.5 story or 1.5 story buildings that are only counted on the main floor or the 2 floors prior to the half story.
You could build a 1,500 square foot house on this property.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I mean, essentially what you're saying is we want a house that's bigger. We want a house that's more appropriate for 5,000 square feet on a lot that's smaller. It's a design choice.
You're not correct in that, I guess.
I want you to prove to me that I'm incorrect. That's kind of what I was trying to say before.
Well, I guess what I'll pivot here and say that if we believed that it was easy to build on this lot, it would have been done already. We are the 3rd owners since it was commercially used last. I believe it was about 12 years ago, and it was used for commercial parking. It is still, I believe, has a secondary commercial preferred zoning. I'm not 100% sure on that. We have been specifically looking at this from the R2B zoning perspective. Additionally, homes built prior to January 1st, 2008 that exceed the maximum floor area ratio and building additions that would cause the buildings to exceed a maximum floor area ratio may increase their gross floor area
one time by no more than 500 square feet. That's ordinance 552.120. And we will never be allowed that ordinance or to build our property beyond whatever we start with. I guess I'd like to point out that the reason the second floor looks at it as it is because we are trying to build a home that is simple, just 4 walls, and that maximizes the square footage on the rooftop for a solar array that we would really appreciate to have. We originally were hoping that we could also do geothermal on this lot, but that is just not in the cards anymore, just due to cost overruns and what we've been quoted on that. Is there anything you want me to show? Actually, I guess I will yield any, or you get your own time, don't you? I guess I would
They could
stand
have
for
their
the
own
questions.
time too, it's
Yeah.
okay.
If there's any questions of me, I would stand for them.
I'm just trying to get you to tell me why this is different than what the rules require. What about it? I mean, you could build a smaller house on this lot. We're not even asking you, is it affordable, because you're gonna own it, that's awesome. But, I mean, someone could come and buy it and build a 1,500 square foot house on it, correct? It just, you couldn't do that because you don't want to have a house that size, I understand that. But the rule is the rule. You either have to have a practical difficulty or hardship, Mr. Coolhouse explained it, and you don't have one, and that's why everyone's telling you no. But we like the fact that you're building a house, that's cool, it should just be smaller because it's a smaller lot. You're welcome to speak, ma'am. Absolutely, come on up. You still have 3 minutes plus your 2 minutes. I'm trying to help you get me to say yes, but I'm not hearing anything that is helping me with that.
I think that the practical difficulty feels like it's related to the alley access. I think if we had an alley access, we would just have built the house of 1,800 square feet and we wouldn't need to be here because you can put the garage in the back and it wouldn't count. And I think that the lack of that access is what feels like the practical difficulty for us in building a home that has an ability to park cars, 2 cars in a space that we live in Minnesota, right? So that alley access feels like our primary reasoning for a practical difficulty or the lack thereof, along with the narrowness of the lot. So, for example, if we chose to continue with a smaller home and a detached garage, which would allow us to perhaps not be here, we would bump up against the need for impervious space, and we would probably be back here anyways with the driveway and then the total garage space in the backs. Sorry. So I think we are arguing that the size and the lack of access are indeed hardships, and it's not just a design choice we're making to have a larger house. We're trying to make a home that is practical and fits the neighborhood, and that, levels up to the 2040 plan in a way that utilizes vacant lots. It brings more people live in the city. So we do think that our proposal is on a large scale supporting the Minneapolis 2040 plan by bringing in more residents and utilizing unused space. And we think that the lot being vacant still is a very good piece of evidence for us that would imply that it is difficult to build on, and so practical difficulties have existed for not just us, but the previous 2 or 3 owners, which is why it's still vacant. And so we think that piece is important in our argument, and then again, the total size and access, the narrowness of the lot, to build a home that is practical and that does inspire someone to take action to utilize this space for the betterment of the city. Those are hardships that exist and have existed, and we believe that the lot would have already been developed if it were not hard to build on. Does that help answer your question?
Kind of, but that was a good try. You've stuck to the detail. I appreciate that.
Let me just look and see if there's anything else.
Don't worry about the clock. I'll give you 2 more minutes.
Thanks.
There is someone else here to speak. Evan Hall, did you want to say something, sir?
When she's ready, when you're ready.
Okay, I'll go and then I'll let Evan go.
Okay.
So I think I just also would like to highlight that our proposed plan is more, perhaps even more mindful of total lot usage than something that would apply to your rules. So for example, if we had built a home and put a rear access garage on, if we had the ability to do that, we wouldn't need to be here, right? But the total space of the lot covered would be significantly greater. Take away green space, take away opportunities for us to like build a rain garden, which is something we've talked to the Holland Neighborhood Association about. So I think that like it's important to note that maybe it is possible in other ways, but we believe that this is the best use of the space, and that it's a thoughtful consideration of the rules in a practical way. So instead of just saying, okay, here's the GFA, let's fit within that, we found ways to make a better use of the land. And again, those two hardships make it almost impossible to fit within these rules. And then I think I just asked some accessory information for you. Like it's taken us over a year and a half and thousands of dollars to be here, and you're the first step, right? So I think that the chances of this lot being developed by a normal person is really, really rare. So I think we're doing our best, and I think it's just worth noting. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Evan Hall, 1276 Berkeley Avenue, St. Paul. This property has been acting as a commercial-like property for many years. It is paved over and was used as a parking lot, as a double curb cut. It is, of course, zoned R2B as it is seen, but the design team has explored many options with the applicant, including the one that was mentioned, an impervious lot that shows a driveway to the back with a garage that would have a more impervious surface than was being proposed. It is in kind with the neighborhood, and it is what feels right in the neighborhood to have a two-car garage in the front, which is similar, if you were to walk around this neighborhood, to a lot of the neighbors. That's not a great, maybe in itself a reason, but it feels right in the neighborhood. So many of the houses conform to a similar design than what's before you today. Previous owners determined the challenges of this lot overbearing and is the prime reason for the sale to the applicant. Constraints of lot and variety of housing in the area include lots of commercial vernacular housing, where this is actually a smaller footprint than a lot of the commercial lots on the opposite side of the block along University Avenue. The lofted area, as we mentioned, in the home is a design consideration. However, the square footage is counted twice for the first floor area that is lofted above. If you remove the lofted area, this house fits within the 2,500 square foot requirement that the city has put in front of it. And that is all I have.
Are you the architect?
I'm a draftsperson.
Why don't you do that then? If you can build the exact same house without the lofted area, why don't you just cut it down and put an outdoor deck or something that would not be inside and you wouldn't have this problem?
We've explored multiple options with the applicant.
Okay. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Koolhaas. Could they build a house with a garage in back? I mean, we without question, we're not thrilled about, I don't want to use the derogatory term for them, but garage, I had one, so I understand it. Garage is in front. Could they potentially build a garage in back and not have this problem? And what about the other houses on this block? Do they have front garages also?
Councilmember Goodman, it is speculatory, but theoretically, yes, they could make substantial design changes to the house to put a garage in the back. That could potentially create issues with other zoning code requirements, like the extent of impervious surface that would be added for a longer driveway. We have not evaluated this because we have not seen a proposal for that. So again, I'm only speculating, but theoretically, yes, they could put a garage in the back, but, I expect it would require substantial changes to the design. I know the appellants had provided some other examples of, I don't think it was on this same block, but elsewhere in Northeast, of some other, not exactly the same structures, but others that I think were built within the last 10 years and have attached front-facing garages that were different for a number of reasons. I was not aware of those projects prior to the appellants bringing them to our attention, but the circumstances around those projects are materially different than the circumstances that are in play here and today. And with other properties on the immediate block, I can't think of any other attached front-facing garages that come to mind, but I'm not familiar with all the facades on the street. I will say generally my understanding is that this property is smaller than many of its immediate neighbors or others on the block.
But the smaller lot is not really as big of an issue because we're allowing them to build something as big as they could build on a 5,000 square foot lot on this lot, correct?
Correct.
So we're saying it doesn't matter if your lot is smaller, we'll even let you build something more appropriate for a 5,000 foot lot on a 4,300 foot lot.
Correct. The zoning code has a specific call out, exemption to say, even though the standard maximum floor area ratio is 0.5 or 50% of the lot area, for a smaller lot, we will guarantee a gross floor area of up to 2,500 square feet, which is what would be allowed on a 5,000 square foot lot. And to Mr. Thomason's point about the lot being non-conforming, there are other provisions of the zoning code dealing with non-conforming lots that say on a lot that is non-conforming to minimum lot area or minimum lot width, we still allow construction of a single 2 or 3 family dwelling, provided all other applicable zoning code requirements are met.
Okay. Could they build a garage underground? Like, could they come at it and then go under and then still build the same size house that they want?
But theoretically, yes. Again, we have not evaluated a proposal like that. We have not been formally presented with a proposal like that. That could potentially create other challenges from a zoning code perspective. But theoretically, it's a possibility.
Okay. Are there other questions for staff? Councilmember Osman.
Thank you. This lot has been vacant for a long time. Are there any other folks that came through that see this as a tiny place and not able to build?
I'm not sure about other staff at the city. I can say from my experience in the last 3 or 4 years, I know I had talked to one previous property owner who came forward with the design and then ultimately ended up not moving forward. I obviously can't speak for that previous property owner, but there's at least one other concrete example of someone who is trying to do something similar to what the appellants are trying now, building a new home for their owner occupancy, who for reasons that are their own, decided not to pursue that and sold the property.
My experience in small urban spaces usually create problems in the neighborhood, trashes and so on. And has there been any report from 311 or anything?
I'm not familiar with any, no.
Thank you.
You would not consider a property without an alley a hardship, correct? That is I lived on one, so it's not common, but it's not uncommon.
On its own, no, that's not something we would consider to be a challenge or something that is unique across the board. We understand that can contribute to difficulties, but again, there are other options. We allow curb cuts on street frontages when no alley access is provided and so forth.
Other questions or comments? Thank you for your report. Seeing none, I do think this is kind of a difficult decision, but unfortunately, I don't see how we could legally say that the property is unique when there are many other properties that are like it, and the staff are opposed, and the Board of Adjustment are opposed. It would be, I think, out of line of the committee to turn around and simply say, well, we like you, you're nice people, we want you to build a house, because we do like all of those things. But there's nothing unique about the property that's in a unique condition, I think, that would allow us to grant this variance. And the committee has been quite strict about making sure that we are consistent with people across the board. So for that reason, as much as I would love to see you build this house, I would have to move to deny the appeal. Are there other comments, questions, opinions? Councilmember Rainville.
I will be voting in favor of the denial, but I just want to encourage you to go back to the drawing board and listen to our staff, and they'll help guide you to what you can build. It would be just an honor to have you. I live in Northeast too, and I would love to have you for neighbors, but we're elected officials. We take an oath of office, and we have to obey the rules that are in front of us. So please, if this is denied, go back to our staff and work with them. They'll bend over backwards to help you build the house of your dreams.
On the motion to deny the appeal, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No. No, sorry.
The appeal is denied. We'll move on to site plan approval for City Homes on Park Avenue, 2432 Chicago Avenue. Ms. Silas, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. The project before you today is an appeal of the City Planning Commission's decision to approve site plan review at the property 2432 Chicago Avenue. This site is located in the Built Form Corridor 6 overlay district and therefore allows for up to 6 stories in height. The applicant has proposed a new 5-story mixed-use building containing 20 dwelling units and 2,400 square feet of commercial space. The submitted site plan originally included 2 variances to the north and south interior side yards that I'll cover with a bit more detail, but those were recommended for denial by staff and were denied at Planning Commission and are not the subject of an appeal. The Planning Commission did approve the site plan for a building with conditions of approval that require that the building comply with the north and south interior side yard setbacks. On August 10th, David Asselstein, on behalf of City Homes on Park Avenue, submitted an appeal of the City Planning Commission's decision to approve the site plan review application, specifically regarding their decision to approve that application without a condition of approval, requiring the applicant install a perimeter fence along the rear of the property. So here is that aerial view of the site. As you'll see, it is currently vacant. There is a driveway along the rear of the site that is in the location where one would expect an alley to be, but it is a private drive serving the neighboring association to the west. And there are some errors on the applicant submitted materials that were not identified at the time by the applicant or staff that was shown on some plans as an alley. That is not an alley and is instead private property. So the interior side yard setbacks for any building in the residential districts, if the building depth exceeds 75% of the lot depth, the interior side yard setbacks are increased by 2 feet on each side. So the applicant had proposed a building that exceeded 75% of where the building depth exceeded 75% of the lot depth, resulting in an increased setback. So when the variances were denied, the simple solution would be to shorten the building by 10 feet, and that would result in a building that is complying with the side yard setbacks. So that is what staff recommended, and that is the outcome of the City Planning Commission hearing. So the applicant has submitted a revised site plan showing the building depth at no more than, or at slightly less than 75% of the lot depth. And just as a note, because the project requires no variances at this point, those variances were denied, and the number of dwelling units in the proposed building is now 16 rather than 20. It would be an administrative review if it were submitted as a new application, which is why staff recommended approval of the site plan review application, understanding that with the conditions of approval attached by staff, it would be compatible with what the applicant could submit today as a new administrative application. So this is the original site plan that was submitted by the applicant. As you can see, it is shown on the plan that is an alley to the rear, and that is incorrect. The revised site plan that was submitted recently by the applicant shows that correctly as a private driveway and I can go back and forth a little bit, and has shortened the building by 10 feet and reconfigured the rear of the property to provide more green space, trees along the property line, and to relocate the trash to make it clear that trash is going to be collected down the sidewalk and then collected off of Chicago Avenue here. So I can briefly go through some of the floor plans, but these will be revised to, as the building is shortened to 10 feet, since these were the original ones proposed. So originally, the applicant had proposed 4 units on each of the upper 4 floors. Or sorry, 5 units on each of the upper 4 floors. And then here are some elevations, but once again, those would be revised with to comply with the denial of the variances and conditions of approval. So the appellant has requested that the city council condition the site plan review application to require a perimeter fence be installed along the rear of the property. The appellant statement has a lot of information about the request for a perimeter fence and the concerns that the association has about trespass onto their property from residents of this new development. When it comes to conditioning site plan review applications, typically those conditions are tied to some sort of request for alternative compliance or some sort of deviation in the plan that staff identifies as needing a condition to remedy. This proposed plan has only one request for alternative compliance, and that has to do with not providing a temporary loading zone on the site. There's no curb cut proposed, there's no parking proposed, so staff was willing to grant the alternative compliance with the understanding that the applicant can request a temporary drop-off and pickup zone along Chicago Avenue through Public Works. So staff recommends that the City Council deny the appeal and approve the site plan review application with the 10 conditions recommended by staff, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Silas on this report? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We will invite the appellant to speak first. Mr. Hall, I'm confused as to who you are. Who are you here for?
Wilson Molina.
He's the applicant on 2432 Chicago as well, and the appellant would be David Asselstein.
Okay, all right, so the appellant gets to speak first. Mr. Asselstein, welcome. This is not asking for a variance, but for a site plan condition. So why should we tell the appellant they have to put up a fence? Why don't you put up a fence?
I'll address that in my my talk.
Great.
My name is David Asselstein. I'm Secretary of the Board of Directors at City Homes on Park Avenue, and I am speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors. The site plan for 2432 Chicago Avenue doesn't fully consider the lot's limited street access, its rear location along our association's private drive, Columbus Court, nor being located between neighboring properties with easement rights to use our drive. Consider this general intention in the zoning code under site plan review, general provisions, purpose. Site plan review standards are established to promote development that is compatible with nearby neighbors, to minimize pedestrian and vehicular conflict. The regulations recognize the unique character of land and development throughout the city and the need for flexibility in the site plan review. In addition, zoning code 530.260 requires fencing to prevent criminal activity. In our case, the association is going to be inundated with trespassing from the development's rear door. The building will be located between neighboring properties who have easement rights to use our private drive, but this lot does not have easement rights. The future tenants of the building will see neighbors on both sides freely coming and going on Columbus Court, and they would surely come to believe it is an alley. Consider this, even though Wilson Molina, the developer and owner of the lot, was told on January 23rd that the rear drive was a private road to which his lot has no easement rights, and after which Wilson Molina proceeded to ask the president of our board if he could get easement rights and was not given that. After all that, even he labeled our private drive in all his surveys and architectural drawings as an alley in the site plan submitted to the city. Will renters understand that they cannot use our drive when even the owner and developer refuse to do so? No. Much of the rear door activity will inevitably result in trespassing. The plan even has a sidewalk leading to our drive. And this was the original plan that we were shown that had a sidewalk here that I'm referencing. Renters will simply believe that our drive is an alley and that they, as residents of Minneapolis, have the right to use it. They will believe that they can park their cars on our drive and that they can stand their ground if asked to leave. This confusion will open the potential for criminal trespassing to take place, not to mention the potential for physical conflict with our homeowners trying to assert their ownership. We seek the committee's resolve to prevent such crimes from ever becoming possible. Furthermore, the committee can also consider 3 policies of the 2040 plan. 1, Policy 6, pedestrian-oriented building and site design. 2, Policy 8, public safety through environmental design. 3, Policy 80, development near metro stations. All three policies include action steps to orient buildings and building entrances to the street and sidewalk. Given that this particular lot only has a single side access to a street, it is clear that the rear door activity must be guided back towards Chicago Avenue. Our property's private drive needs to be recognized, as well as the neighboring property's easement rights and the apartment building's lack of easement rights. There needs to be some action taken towards lessening conflict, eliminating the potential for criminal trespassing, and increasing compatibility. In defense of our appeal, I would like to point out that Zoning Code 530.260 does not state any limitations regarding its application other than the prevention of crime through design elements. Any planning staff opinions regarding the intention of the code's application, but which are not actually stated in the code, have no legal basis. And any arguments referring to precedents as being set by the planning department's prior interpretation or application of this code do not repeal nor deny the application of the code in this case to require fencing to prevent the potential for the crime of criminal trespassing from occurring. The code is clear on fencing being used for such an application. Any suggestion that the association can install a fence along our border must recognize the 3 properties surround this property, and a single fence along our property, the tenants would just walk around it. Last, the notion that a line of shrubs will prevent people from accessing our drive is simply not realistic, especially in consideration of traffic-heavy Chicago Avenue versus our empty, quiet drive just outside the building's rear door. City Homes and Parks seeks the requirement of a wraparound rear and side perimeter fence to guide the occupants exiting and entering the rear door back towards Chicago Avenue in accordance with the reference policies of the 2040 plan and Zoning Code 530.260. I thank the committee for your consideration in this matter, and I'll stand by for any comments or questions you may have.
So I guess my one question is, if Mr. Molina was amenable to it, would your condo association pay to put up a fence?
I cannot answer that because that's a discussion amongst the board.
So that would be no.
I simply can't answer it because I'm a single member of the board, and it's a board decision.
Okay. Great, thank you. You have 4 minutes and 4 minutes plus left. Is there anyone else here from the board that would like to speak?
There's only myself.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm curious if I need to go through the specifics of the code. I gave in my statement that I filed references to this code, and I gave you a copy of the code. Yep. Do I need to also go through that?
Nope, you don't.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, maybe you can answer the question, why won't Mr. Molina put up a fence?
So, my name is Evan Hall. I'm representing Wilson Molina at 507 East Lake Street in Minneapolis. We want to work with the neighborhood and the neighbors, and Wilson Molina is not opposed to putting up a fence. It's just the requirement from the city, if it's required or not, needs to be clarified. I do have a presentation that shows updated information that might help describe the project a little bit more.
Okay, you are welcome. First of all, I don't think the clock is going to be an issue here.
It should only take 2 minutes, actually.
Yes, you're welcome to give the presentation, but we're spending a lot of time talking about a fence. So if you would just say, yes, Mr. Molina will put up a fence, we could be done with it.
I don't, once again, I'm not Wilson Molina, I cannot say that, but he is not opposed to putting up a fence. I don't, honestly, I think,
I mean, the city has worked with Mr. Molina a lot, and we hold him in high regard. So if he was here, I would think he would probably say, let's make this unpleasantness go away and the accusations of what renters might or might not do. I'm not even comfortable with that. I don't know what people who rent do. I don't think it's different than if it was condo owners and what they would do. It is a very unusual situation with the private drive without easement, so it would just be easier for us to get to the point where you would say, Mr. Molina, we'd like you to put up a fence, and the neighbors would feel more comfortable, and then they would be happy and it would all be good, rather than having the government have to come in and tell you what to do.
sure, and I'll state the original floor plans of the site plan did show a fence completely surrounding the property. We've actually revised the plan to not show a fence per the city requirements. So if we want to work with the neighborhood and the city, and if I say we're going to build a fence right now, I'd probably be paying for it. So I just want to, honestly,
So do you want us to tell you to do it? Is that what you're suggesting?
is heavily probable that Wilson will put up a fence, as most properties similar to this do have fences.
Okay, let me give you your opportunity to speak, and if it would make it easier for you, I'm happy to ask you to put up the fence in the approvals, but, I mean, I have a health situation with Mr. Chavez's family, and people are, you know, we're talking about a fence. We're not here to really talk about fences generally, so give your presentation, and maybe we can come to an agreement about a fence.
With that said, I don't think I need to give the
We
presentation.
think what you're doing is good. We just want you to put up a fence. So just say you'll put up tell Mr. Molina we love him. But we think if this is a way to stop this unpleasant kind of conversation about who is going to do what and who they are, it does say in our crime prevention by environmental design standards that that would be a best practice. Councilmember Osman showed me that. That's why I didn't ask the young man giving his presentation to show me that, because Councilmember Osman knew it already. So cool for you. You're doing something good. We love what you're doing. We want you to put up a fence so that we can not have this neighbor conflict.
Oh, so I am, yeah, what I said is Wilson is heavily willing to provide a fence.
Okay.
So like, what kind of fence, like, is it the whole property? I think that needs to be clarified
Okay.
slightly.
That's fair. You are correct, and we're not using up one iota of your
'Cause
time.
we could-
Ms. McMahon.
Okay. Should I sit
Hi, can you join us for a moment? This seems to be taking longer than it should. It sounds like the appellant would just simply like Mr. Molina, again, who we hold in high regard, to just put up a fence. And it sounds like he's saying along the back. I didn't hear him say around the entire property. That would probably be costly, I would guess.
Correct.
So is there a way for you to work with the appellant and Mr. Molina in the 2 weeks we have until the council meeting to come to an agreement so we don't have to adjudicate this, and this poor Mr. Hall, who has now spoken twice and is put in this odd position, doesn't have to make a commitment for Mr. Molina? Could we move this forward without recommendation and rely on your team to work on coming to some compromise between the two parties?
Councilmember, absolutely. I think we can work with that. I think that would be an ideal outcome.
Okay, and Councilmember Osman is happy to help as well. And I don't want to put Mr. Hall in this terrible situation, and I don't want Mr. Molina to not do business with the city, because he's done a lot of great houses. He really has, and we hold him in high regard, and we've sold him a lot of property, and he's done a good job. So it would be, and these folks are sticking with it, living in the city, you know, so we want them to be happy too. We don't want any more accusations of who would do what.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Hall, would you like to have part of your time? You are welcome to.
So, well, I think we're gonna build a fence, I think is what it boils down to. But we'll work with city staff and clarify that.
Okay, so just to be fair, what would happen next is, I think Councilmember Osman will say a few words, and he'd like to move this forward without recommendation. What that means is you have between today and a week from Thursday, with the assistance of our fine staff, to come to an agreement.
Okay.
Now, okay, thank you. I would suggest, sir, that you talk to staff after this. You're winning, so don't say anything.
I just wanted to clarify the nature of the fence.
I wouldn't be picky about it. I think you guys can get together and determine with staff what would be best.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Osmer.
Yes, thank you, Council Chair. Did a great job. The city homes on the park, I met them, very nice residents, beautiful area they have. They really welcome your presence. You come in there, they want to make sure that you're a good neighborhood and you want to be a good neighborhood. And I thank you for working with the staff. And also, I talked to Mr. Millen on the phone before the council meeting, and he's no opposition to a fence, like you mentioned. But I'm happy to meet with you and the staff and before the council meeting. Thank you, Council. And I would like to move this without recommendation, this item for the council. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Sir.
I think it might be advisable to formally close out the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. I will thank Mr. Hall for not using up any of his time and officially close the public hearing. And then Councilmember Osman has moved this forward without recommendation. Just for the minutes, to note that our planning staff, Ms. Silas, Ms. McMahon, the neighbors, the applicant will have a meeting to discuss what they can agree on. And let's agree that new renters would be a good thing, not necessarily a negative thing. Beautiful. Everyone good with that? Yes, yes? Okay, so on the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion is moved forward without recommendation. Thank you, Ms. Silas, Ms. McMahon, Mr. Hall, and David, since I didn't want to pronounce your name incorrectly. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the last item, which is a variance appeal at 2648 Marshall Street Northeast. I do want to note that Councilmember Chavez had a family health issue, and that is why he is not able to stay. Ms. Silas, welcome.
Good afternoon again. This project before you is at 2648 Marshall Street Northeast. That may sound familiar because there was an extremely similar project. Some may say the same project that came through in 2021. For this site, very similar proposal. So the applicant has resubmitted for this proposal and is asking once again for the city to consider their project. The site is over 20,000 square feet along the Mississippi River. It's occupied by an existing duplex along Marshall and a detached garage to the rear of the duplex, which is about in the middle of the site. The applicant has proposed to establish a cluster development which would include the existing duplex to remain at the front of the site, a new detached structure containing one dwelling unit, and a new detached garage. So in 2021, staff recommended approval of the project. It was approved by the Planning Commission and then denied upon appeal by the City Council. So applicants are permitted to resubmit a project as long as at least 1 year has elapsed. Even if that proposal is substantially similar to a previous proposal that was not approved. So at its July 31st meeting, the City Planning Commission took the following actions on the project. They approved the cluster development as recommended by staff. They denied the two variance requests for structure placement within the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area Overlay District and the Shoreland Overlay District. Both of those districts, it's a little redundant. They have a restriction on structure placement near the top of bluff lines and steep slopes and within 40 feet of those features. So the proposal, and you'll see when we get to the site plan that the proposal has the new structure kind of spanning the top of the bluff line or steep slope. So the appellant, who is also the applicant, Andy Wattenhofer, filed an appeal of the City Planning Commission's decision to deny the variances. Here is an aerial view of the site. This is a really unique situation. There is a large-scale apartment building to the north and an industrial concrete crushing facility to the south, with this one long residential lot kind of nestled in between. Here's a site plan that shows it's very small because of how long the lot is. Shows the duplex at the front of the site, a couple of off-street parking spaces to serve the duplex, a new garage and the new structure, which would kind of be built over the top of the bluff line or steep slope. So this is kind of a slope diagram, just showing the slope on the site and kind of where the structure will sit compared to where the top of the slope is and where the 40-foot setback from the top of the slope would be. The applicant, as part of this new submittal, submitted the shown aerial photos of the project, indicating that throughout the history of the site, there has been a lot of modification to the site with concrete and parking areas. There is still a concrete driveway. The actual steep slope or bluff line on the site doesn't necessarily cover the entire site. Staff had a meeting with the DNR to kind of discuss the bluff line and implications of the slope on the site, and it's likely that the actual slope is more kind of in the middle of the site and does not cover the driveway, as that's been modified over time to allow for vehicular access. I'm not sure I have a plan here showing, but the existing detached garage is built in a very close, or you can see it. It's very tiny, the outline of where the existing garage is located on the site, which is very close to the top of the steep slope. So here are some photo or renderings of the proposed new structure. And so staff recommended approval of the 3 applications in 2021. Staff has once again recommended approval of the applications. The findings that we'll get into in a moment are the same, slightly different, as Alex mentioned, that we are not looking at practical difficulty, rather unique circumstances now, although this project was submitted before July 1st, so we're still looking at the practical difficulty finding. This site is designated for parks in the future land use, and even though the designation is for parks, this is a privately owned site. There are some privately owned sites that are designated for parks future land use, and those we have kind of applied zoning districts that would allow them to kind of continue under private ownership for the foreseeable future. The comprehensive plan does not prohibit owners from using their privately owned sites, even if they are designated for parks in the future. And the applicant and city staff and park board staff have had some meetings discussing some private agreements that the applicant may enter into with the park board about future acquisition of the site, although I don't believe there are any agreements in place as of this moment. When it comes to the MRCA and shoreland overlay ordinances, I know that in your packets you have a couple of comments from the National Park Service and the Department of Natural Resources. They have submitted letters asking that the City Planning Commission and City Council deny the proposed variances. While these ordinances derive from state statute, they were adopted into the Minneapolis zoning code, and that is how they are administered. So local municipalities are tasked with administering these ordinances, and there are authorized variances to these ordinances, which have been assessed here. Variances require meeting the required findings, and those findings apply to variances to the MRCA and shoreland overlay districts, as well as any other standard kind of setback variances or other type of variances requested. When it comes to the variance analysis, staff has found that practical difficulties do exist in complying with the ordinance. The top of the steep slope and bluff line result in a required structure setback of 195 feet from the ordinary high water line. So compliance with that structure setback provision alone restrict the buildable area of the lot by 46%. And that doesn't account for any additional setback requirements for the site. Nearby sites, including Marshall Terrace Park, which is located 2 parcels to the north, have bluff lines that are located much closer to the river. So the bluff line for the site really does kind of cut in on this property specifically and is greater than some of the surrounding properties. The location of the steep slope and bluff line and the resulting restriction on buildable area for the site are unique circumstances that were not created by the applicant. Staff has analyzed that the proposal is reasonable. The applicant has proposed to set the new building back 96 feet from the ordinary high water line, and the structure will kind of have a pier and grade beam foundation to minimize impact on slopes and trees. The applicant has proposed a number of enhancements to the site when it comes to stormwater, including rain gardens and native plantings, and remediation of existing concrete on the site that was from previous development and the nearby industrial use. Staff has found that proposed variance will not alter the essential character of the area or have any negative impact on the surrounding health, safety, or welfare of the general public. As shown in those aerial photos, a portion of the site on what is currently the steep slope and bluff line has been used for kind of parking, driving, loading areas. There's currently a garage located on that portion of the site. There was at one time a dock in the river shown on these aerial photos. There has been kind of modification to the site over time that with some, somewhat intense modification due to the nature of the industrial use to the south. So staff finds that kind of remediating some of the concrete, adding native plantings, adding a new structure that's going to add some very gentle density to this lot right on the Mississippi is compatible with the ordinance and the comprehensive plan. So staff recommends approving the appeal and approving the variances to structure placement in the Merca and Shoreland overlay districts as originally recommended by staff, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your report. So 3 of us already voted on this. So nothing has changed, correct? It's the same exact application that I was one of them, that we already said no to. I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yes.
And we can have this once a year until there's a change in the makeup of the council, or the comprehensive plan is clarified, or, I mean.
Yeah, so, we discussed it with the applicant, and their hope was to kind of try to come back and make the case. Some of the information that's submitted with the current application has to do with kind of like aerial photos. Some of the findings the staff made in 2021 are not the same findings that we have made in 2023, in that in 2021 we were really focusing on kind of historic use of the site. We were thinking the practical difficulty had to do with modification of the bluff line to make that bluff line cut into the site more, than the surrounding properties, right? There was a lot of uncertainty, confusion at that time because we did not have kind of the same level of aerial photographs submitted as part of the application, and had, there was concern that perhaps this is the natural bluff line on this property alone, and every other property near the site has been modified. So when thinking about this new application, staff really spent a lot of time thinking about, are there practical difficulties on the site, right? Like, we did not want to get into the weeds of, we obviously don't have topographical maps from, 1920 to tell us what was the, historically, what was the topography of the bluff line like. So we didn't want to get stuck in the weeds of talking about the modification by humans being the practical difficulty. When we're thinking about the practical difficulty, the structure setback requirements do restrict the buildable area of the site by almost 50%. And typically staff doesn't say that there has to be no other possibility for building on the site, right? Is there a unique circumstance on the site that is creating a situation that is making it difficult to find a spot to put this new structure, especially when the applicant is really hoping to have it be a one-level structure for, disability and aging in place reasons. So we kind of focused on that question of the unique circumstance and practical difficulty, and kind of taking out the whole conversation about, was the bluff line modified in the past or not by human activity, and in what direction, and is the bluff line in this site more modified or less modified than nearby sites, and focus more on, is the bluff line on this specific site, is that unique to the site? Is that creating unique challenges? Is that a practical difficulty to adding the type of, very gentle density that is proposed on this site? And so with kind of this slightly different lens of just looking at the site itself from what we can prove historically, staff once again got to the point of recommending approval of the proposal. And the applicant did submit some historic photographs. Obviously they don't show topography, but they do show that there has been modification since the 1960s on the site by human activity, which may or may not have significantly altered the topography. And in addition, the bluff does cut in on this site more than it does on surrounding sites. Can we say why that is? Not necessarily, but we can say that that is the case. And so compared to nearby lots, this is a unique circumstance, and it does constrain the options for the applicant to add another dwelling unit on the site.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'll see if there's any other questions for you. Are there other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, thanks so much. We will first ask the appellant to step forward, and you are welcome to have 10 minutes if you need 10 minutes. It's okay. You've sat patiently for over an hour.
My apologies. Not quite 10 minutes. And in fact, I'm probably not going to do the presentation I intended because it's mostly attempting to answer the questions that you've already asked. Specifically with regard to the appeal in 2021 that was denied, or that was approved and gave us the denial. So I'm not here to present the same plan as I did back then, because at the time, the findings of fact that were adopted indicated that the reason for the denial of the variances was that we had not substantiated whether the bluff located on our property had been modified by previous development, as we were claiming, or that it was a natural, original, undeveloped bluff. And so we agreed ultimately with that finding because we do believe that the onus is on us to provide that substantiation, the full, complete information, so that we're able to make the appropriate decision in this regard. And so in the time since then, we have researched the history of the property and gathered the information that substantiates that this bluff has indeed been modified heavily by prior developments. And I've included some of the aerial photographs, additional ones in the statement of appeal that I filed that make it, I've presented it in an easier way to follow. But effectively, you can see that there's been addition of pavement, paved driveways and parking areas, addition of concrete infill material and earth and walls to build up the slope height, and the placement of this garage on the top of the slope. And all told, with all of these developments, most of the land, almost all of the land on this bluff has been modified in some way by these developments. And so that is the difference with our appeal today, is that we have taken the advice of the appeal from 2021 and provided that additional information to substantiate our claim. I would continue. I think that we don't believe that the intent of the MRCCA and shoreland overlay ordinances is to protect the natural or the developed features on the bluff. It is the setback requirements are intended to protect a natural bluff from the detrimental effects of development on that bluff. And in this case, I don't think that we can effectively apply that protection on property where the development has already occurred and those detrimental effects are already present on this bluff. And in that regard, I think that we can, with variances to the setback requirements, we can maintain consistency with the intent and purposes of the law, of the ordinances. I think that would do it. I can answer a question about the future park use as well, because Lindsay mentioned it. that there is a letter included in the public comments packet from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board that speaks on that topic, of our engagement with the Park Board in planning for the transition of ownership of this property to the park system. And with that plan in motion, we are coordinating with the Park Board to ensure that this, that the next use of this property is for a public park as called for in the comprehensive plan. That's all I have.
So would that, thank you for hitting on that. So would that mean that you would have some sort of agreement with them that when
Yes.
you no longer were using this house and had moved on in whatever way you moved on, they could purchase the property?
Yeah.
Which is really what they want.
And there's, you know, it's a very complicated, the number of options are very, very complicated, but the Park Board has a process by which we enter into a memorandum of understanding that sort of lays out a timeline for deciding on these various factors, when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen, all those things. And so that is something that we're in the process of engaging with. We have not entered into that agreement yet because I have agreed with Park Board staff to put that on hold while we get through this plan first. So we'll intend to resume that somewhere down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. Councilmember Ellison, did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. What would be, I don't know what the body's going to do here in a few moments here, but what would be the timeline, assuming you got the outcome that you're looking for, of the MOU being signed, I guess, is if you have a ballpark estimate on that?
Right. So Adam Jarvidson of the Park Board is who I've been working with, and we agreed that a couple of weeks maybe after we've gone through this process, we would begin that again. And that entails then we would actually sign this agreement, and that goes to the Park Board for their meeting of commissioners, and it has to be approved then. And that's what formalizes it, so that then park staff are authorized to work with us on that process.
Councilmember Osman, did you have a question?
If it's, I'm not sure if this is what you were getting to, but in terms of the time frame of when things would happen, when we would actually begin the process of transitioning ownership, that can be anything from this year until 40 years from now or whenever it is, but because of the different mechanisms by which they can do it. But I do anticipate at least that we would have some kind of ownership transfer completed within my lifetime at least, probably much sooner.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So is there anyone else that you'd like to speak during your portion of the 10 minutes, sir?
My architect is here.
Okay, you're welcome to come up. I don't want to look at the wrong person.
I got a prepared statement for my kind of 2 minutes is what I was shooting for, so I'll just read that. Hello, Chair Goodman and members of the council. My name is Greg Elsner. I'm a member of the Wild Rivers Conservancy, St. Croix 360, both of which are conservation organizations in the watershed I currently reside, and I'm a former resident of Marshall Terrace neighborhood. I'm also a licensed architect and the director of design at Shelter Architecture. Don and Andy have owned their duplex home on this site for years and approached us to help them design a sustainable and accessible home on the rear of their property. The site is extremely unique and presented interesting design challenges, obviously from the major concrete plant to the south and the apartment building and large parking lot to the north, both built out to the river. A walk down from Marshall to the river, navigating the years of construction and concrete debris between imposing retaining walls that flank either side of the site, of this narrow site, really exemplify that fact. What was even more compelling to our firm was Don and Andy's dedication to be good stewards of the river, improving the site, all while thoughtfully adding density to the neighborhood. We discussed the idea of light touch and the concept of a tent pad and started designing a structural system accordingly. Along the way, we're checking in with planning and zoning of the city. Civil and landscape designs enhance the site with a series of gabion walls and retaining and rain gardens at the top of the property, both that reduce runoff and enhance the site's biodiversity with native plantings. We just want you to believe that this project has been approached in the spirit of conservation and stewardship and backs technical expertise beyond that spirit. A great effort and consideration by the owners, it's been designed and vetted by a group of licensed design professionals, a great team of architects, landscape architects, civil and structural engineers, whose career records, education, and license deem them experts in the state of Minnesota. If you really dig into what's being proposed, it's clear Don and Andy's project will leave the site in better condition than it currently is, and not all development is a detriment to the river. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on the appellant side? If not, I'll ask anyone else who's here to speak to please step forward, and you have 2 minutes. Two minutes. Yeah, you guys got that? Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and council members. I'm Colleen O'Connor Toberman. I work at Friends of the Mississippi River as a land use and planning director, and I live in Ward 1 at 2316 St. Anthony Parkway. I'm here to ask you to uphold the Planning Commission's decision to deny these variances. The city's Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area Ordinance protects the river as an asset for all residents, not just those few very fortunate to own waterfront property. In areas like North and Northeast Minneapolis, where the riverfront has been privatized, degraded, and industrialized, it's crucial that waterfront development be held to the same high standards that we expect elsewhere in the city. MERCA variances require several specific and unique written findings, and it doesn't appear to me that the proposed project meets those findings. One required finding is that the extent, location, and intensity of the variance will be in substantial compliance with the MERCA plan. This finding is not met. Where the MERCA bluff setback requirement is 40 feet, the request is for a 0-foot setback to build directly on or over the edge of the bluff. There's no way that encroaching on 100% of the required setback for 100% of the width of the structure substantially complies in extent, location, or intensity. The property is quite large. It appears to me that there's sufficient space for an additional home if designed differently. For instance, a 2-story home could likely comply with a setback. And I'll also note that the proposed garage is 1,000 square feet, which is enormous. That's bigger than many homes. And yet it appears to be only intended to serve the new house being developed. So that garage does nothing to further the city's purpose for allowing cluster developments, which is to increase housing density through efficient use of land. I think it's possible to add another house here under a different design. The city does not have to grant an extreme variance to the MERCA requirements simply because the applicant desires a massive garage and a 1-story home with a riverfront view. These are design preferences. Those are not practical difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Edna Brasitis, and I'm here for Friends of the Riverfront. The bluffs and steep slopes of the Mississippi are beautiful, but fragile and inherently dangerous. The Hennepin County has been very concerned about the series of bluff failures and slope failures that have occurred since 2013. In 2013, a landslide tragically killed 2 young boys and injured 2 other children during a field trip at a St. Paul Park. In 2014, a landslide closed West River Parkway for 2 years, endangered the U of M's hospital, and cost millions of dollars to fix. This was just one of the 2004 landslides in Hennepin County that buried roads, and in a frightening event, damaged houses in Eden Prairie. In 2018, a landslide shut down part of East River Road for most of the summer. 2019, mudslide fears closed the West River Parkway from East Franklin to 4th Street South. And it could happen on Marshall. Hennepin County did a survey and found evidence of historical landslides at Edgewater Park, 24th and Marshall, just blocks from the site, and between 17th and 18th on Marshall. Climate resilience means that you don't build on something that may not survive the changes in climate. The applicant proposes to build on the bluff or on a steep slope, whether it was man-made or otherwise. And he's put a deck out further on the bluff, and it's held up by stilts. That is an unsustainable design. So the critical area ordinance provides zoning tools to deal with this. It's been before the city council before. There's lots of reasons to turn down this. It's a matter of personal preference and design choice, as was recorded in the previous findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Adam Mullenberg. I'm here representing Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, a National Park Service unit based out of St. Paul. We actually share the same boundaries as the Mississippi River Corridor critical area, which is the park project lies completely within that boundary. I'm not going to take too much time. I just wanted to reiterate stuff that we have submitted letters for this project in the previous iterations, and just saying that we do not recommend the approval of the variances. It's just, our concern is that it would set a precedent, as the definition of a bluff has been met here, and then it's allowing not just the encroachment into the bluff impact zone, but that extending it over top of the bluff as well. So what would that set for future developments in different portions of Minneapolis if this was allowed to move forward? So not that there hasn't been some great design and considerations being put forward in the project, but it's just something that is concerned for future developments. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Payne, welcome. Did you have anything you wanted to add, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to just come see the discussion. I actually had an opportunity to go out to the site and look at the property. It is a truly one of a one property. It's a very odd property, no offense. There's retaining walls abutting both edges, and so it's a really challenging issue. You raise a really valid point around this conversation around precedents. I think that that's something we should definitely keep in mind. Also, this discussion around an agreement with the park board is also a one of a one. Well, maybe there's going to be more common agreements like this. So this is a really complex project. And I think that we need to be really thoughtful about the implications of it and recognize that it is truly unique. And I think that whatever precedents that we would be concerned about, this project is just very unique. So it's tough. It's not an easy answer.
Thank you, and thank you so much for taking so much time, even though you don't serve on the committee, to try to create a win-win. Mr. Fussy, I'm wondering, without trying to kick the can down the road, could we have a condition of approval should we determine that they meet the criteria? Could we add a condition of approval that a signed MOU with the park board become part of this prior to the time that a building permit is issued?
Madam Chair, I would have concerns about that. I don't know that there is a nexus to the findings or the decision that is in front of you with regard to potential future ownership of this property. Even though it certainly is a matter of public interest, I don't think it has any connection to the specific quasi-judicial determination that you're charged to make here today.
No, I said after we make the quasi-judicial determination, could we make it a condition of getting a building permit?
Madam Chair, I don't know that you have an issue in front of you regarding a building permit or authority to condition a speculative future building permit that isn't before you. I just don't know of a mechanism. I see where you're going. And perhaps we could discuss more in the interim before full council, but I really don't know of any mechanism or any connection that it would allow you to condition the future potential transfer of ownership of this property to a result that happens here.
Understood. Okay, thank you. I'm just curious, how far along the applicant is with the park board process? I mean, is this, yes, sir, is this it's like an idea? I just recently sold some land to the park board, so I can tell you with all good intentions, it took like 8 months to do an agreement with an MOU with them, so I just don't know how long that would take. You could step up to the, I mean, maybe my situation was different. We were trying to transfer some dog parks to them, so we wanted them to have it, they wanted it, it was all good, and it still took 8 months.
Yeah, you know, in that regard, I want the park board to have the property. It's in part because of what CM Payne described. This is such a unique place, and I don't think that it's really practical that there's going to be an actual park there for decades from now, just because hopefully you saw in the aerial photographs, there's a massive concrete plant next door and an apartment building whose owner I've spoken to, and he has no intention of leaving that anytime soon. So the agreement ends up probably being where the park board would take possession of the property through one of their mechanisms, but it would remain as a current rental property, just as is. And so I think to get to your question about how far along we are, we've had multiple discussions with them on this, and we did in the 2021 application as well. We did talk about it, and at that point we actually had the signed MOU, and it was on its way to the park board commissioners to be adopted at their next meeting. But because of the denial of the appeal at that time, we pulled out of that to regroup. And so we're expecting that this time through that we would just re-execute on that same one. And it would probably sometime this year be adopted then.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ellison.
We're probably getting like dangerously close to like creating a condition informally, but I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to continue this item until we could get to the council could get some clarity on the MOU discussion. It seems to be an area of public interest. It seems like a great opportunity to get this property, I know it's into the future, but into public use to recover some of the river for public use in the future. And so I'm wondering if that would be appropriate.
Madam Chair, committee members, I have to ask staff where we are with regard to 60-day compliance. Certainly there could be voluntary. It would require both parties. If there was going to be a violation of any required review time, there would have to be a voluntary agreement to a continuance. But if there are circumstances that might inform your consideration of this matter and a certain continuance of a discrete amount of time might resolve those issues, I think it might be an option that you could pursue.
Ms. Silas, where are we at on the 60-day clock?
Staff extended it to October 9th, so we still have some time.
Okay, so I would suggest that we postpone this in committee, so it's still on our agenda. I have closed the public hearing. I do want to say that I think there's been some amazing staff work done by Ms. Silas. I started out by asking you what is different, and you answered the question very clearly and concisely, and I think you did a really great job with this. This is a complicated issue. You've stayed true to who you are and what the 2040 plan has called for, recognizing that there could be a win-win, as Councilmember Ellison has suggested. So hats off to you. I thought it was very well handled, and it might lead us to a very positive outcome. Might not, but it might, so let's just see. So I think that the motion by Councilmember Ellison is to postpone in committee for 2 cycles. Does that? I don't know what 2 cycles from now is. I'll look quick. Sorry, scrambling.
Chair Goodman, that
Yes.
would be September 26th.
Okay, so the timing is pretty good. that we have to make a decision by then. So that means you have to make a decision by then and execute some sort of plan, and then can come back and discuss findings and such. So on Councilmember Ellison's motion to postpone in committee 2 cycles, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing no further business before us and without objection, we will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you all.